Can you feel the sunshine? Make it brighter for me. When that sun comes shining on me. I said, can you feel the sunshine? Make it brighter for me. When that sun comes shining on me. I said, can you feel the sunshine? Make it brighter for me. When that sun comes shining on me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trading Spaces, our 21st episode so far. We're going to be talking through, all of the actually pretty exciting price action that we've had lately. We've just closed out April, and it was honestly a phenomenal month, all things considered, across pretty much every asset class. We're going to talk through some of the macro driving forces and what everyone needs to be thinking about. We're going to dig into BTC price action, how ETH's been holding up, a few different alts that we're going to selectively pick through. But before we do that, a very quick disclaimer that, of course, everything that we discuss today is for educational purposes only, should not be construed or taken as financial advice. All right, Den, how you doing?
Hello. Can you believe it's May? It's so crazy. It went
It's
by
wild.
really fast, even though we had such boring price action. Still, time flew by.
It really has. The sun is shining in the ever sunny London, which is beautiful. Almost as rare as the green candles that we're seeing on the BTC chart at the moment. But
Yes. Can you believe
yeah,
this candle? This
I
this
know.
daily that's shaping up. I mean, of course, like it still has to close. So, we're nothing without a close, but I will say like this is a very key area. I mean, at first, I think we should talk a bit about the macro because a lot has happened. We had monthly closes. There was a big earnings week, FOMC.
Mm,
But just a, really quick side note on BTC, like this gray zone we're touching now, this is going to be very interesting. Even though I'm going outside after this, my eyes will still be glued. I will have
mm.
all my alerts set for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, literally as we record right now, and like the past hour, BTC has been making a real move and a really important move at a really important level, which we'll definitely dig deep into. I think what's been really interesting when we get into the macro side of things is that we have just had this week a metric ton of data and also just a load of updates that are super important, especially during all of the uncertainty that we have geopolitically with the Iran situation, which, as I'll talk through, I think is really the potential inflection point, either up or down, for where we go next. And so we had the Federal Reserve's rate cut decision, along with several central banks, the ECB, the Bank of England, the BOE, the Bank of Japan as well. So a lot happening on the macro front. As we anticipated, the Fed kept rates steady. What was notable is that there were four dissents at the inclusion of a dovish kind of or easing skew in the statement. So what that means is that four of the FOMC governors objected to alluding to in the statement that the Fed releases that there is more of a skew towards easing in the future. So what that tells us is there is a slightly more hawkish Federal Reserve, which, translated into normal speak is less likely that they are going to cut rates. Now, why is it of note that four dissented here? It's not unprecedented, but that has not happened for decades. So it's very significant. The other big piece in all of this is Jay Powell announced that while Kevin Warsh, the new Federal Reserve, to be new Federal Reserve chairman, coming this month, actually, Jay Powell will stay on as a voting FOMC member until all of the investigation stuff that's been going on, that is technically right now, has been called off against him. He says is well and truly behind them. So Jay Powell, I think the markets are looking at that saying, okay, this is a slightly more hawkish view on here right now. So we were talking a lot last year, Dan, about like rate cuts and where we go. Do they keep rates? Do they reduce rates? And the market's moved so much on just that single data point. Now things are just very different. There is so many different things that we're looking at, and rate cuts or rate hikes, notably outside of the Federal Reserve, most other central banks are much more likely to hike than they are to cut rates. You could make an argument that the Fed also is in that bucket. I don't necessarily believe that to be the case, but I think that there is a clear argument for it. But we have just a lot more that's compounding, and there's so many mixed signals out there right now that it's kind of like everything's canceling itself out. There's a lot of contradictory stuff, right? So we had loads of economic data. We had PCE, which is our inflation data. We had jobless claims data, which we often have quite frequently. And then we also had tech earnings. Like those three things usually are quite spread out over the quarter, the month, and individually have had quite a big impact on the markets. But when you look at what's happening, right, you've got on the inflation side of things, and actually if we just look at rates, so for crypto, rates going down, which, easing equals more liquidity sloshing around in the system, which is bullish for risk, which is good for crypto. There's two parts to this. Inflation needs to be under control, and the Fed needs to feel it's under control. And the economy needs to be weak. At least the jobs market needs to be weak. Consumer spending needs to be weak, and they will feel that then they need to ease. Well, now we have inflation rising aggressively, actually. PCE was up 0.7% month over month. That is well above the Fed's 2% target. I think it's something like 3.3 year over year, something like that. But when you exclude food and energy, it's up 0.3%, which is still up and higher than they want it to be. But the question really is is this transitory? Is it sticky? Does it go away when the Iran conflict goes away? But on the other side, you've got GDP slowing. Q1 posted a 2% increase quarter over quarter when we had an expectation of 2.3%. So the economy is getting weaker. Inflation is rising. It's kind of a two-way squeeze. You don't want to be raising rates into a weakening economy. You also do not want to be lowering rates into an inflation environment. So my view, and I've kind of said this for a lot of this year, which is maybe not consensus, is that I don't think we will have any rate hikes or rate cuts this year at all. I think it's going to be very tricky. I think the Iran conflict is also going to go on a lot longer than we all think. The jobs market is in a similar situation, which also is a big driver of rate decisions. There was a crazy stat this week. So we had jobless claims, which is how many people have claimed unemployment, right? So a great measure of understanding like firing and people moving and getting like made redundant, for example, in the US. And we had the lowest number of jobless claims since the late 60s. It's a crazy stat, really, like because people are just not losing their job at the moment. So you think, okay, well, that's a pretty strong jobs market. But then when you look on the other side, how many job openings has there been? So we have JOLTS data for this. The past few months have been the worst in terms of new job openings since 2020. And 2020 was some of the worst in like the past couple of decades. So the job market's frozen. And what this tells you is it's just uncertainty. Companies don't
Yeah.
want to hire, they don't want to fire. And
Frozen feels like the right word for
oh my
sure.
God. And Frozen, this like is across the board. You have like consumer spending, which is what we want to see. It's like, okay, people are still confident. They still spend money. They're not just saving. Liquidity's going back in. Companies can, people are investing. Companies can earn more, do better in earnings, et cetera, et cetera. It's increasing, but it's by and large driven by energy costs and the rate at which they're spending is slowing down. So there is some weakness there. Despite all of this, the stock market, the US, like S&P 500, the NASDAQ, have made some of the single largest recorded 1 month gains in its
Yeah,
history.
that monthly candle was insane.
Unbelievable.
That closed
Like,
yesterday. That's also why it was so embarrassing. I mean, obviously, this daily candle is from today, right? Like
yeah.
that we see on BTC. Yesterday, our daily candle looked like this, you know? So compared to equities, it was pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think a lot of this is just, we are, I think where the market is right now is there is a lot of uncertainty, etc., but no one wants to be left on the sidelines. And you know, you have like the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which is an index largely of like all of the now drivers of AI infrastructure, all the semiconductor companies. It's up 47% in 1 month. That is unbelievable. These are some of the
Yeah.
largest businesses in the world, and it's up nearly 50% in a single month. Um, but then,
Feels like an
like,
altcoin,
it
right?
is like an altcoin, right? And like, you are, I think a lot of people in here, it's not at the full spectrum of the risk curve. There's a lot of funds that will have made a huge amount on this through this month. And April was like, April was really a complete outlier when you look at March. March was awful, and everyone was struggling. But you kind of go back to like, okay, well, how are companies doing? And is it a good measure of liquidity? And you look at tech earnings from this week, all of them, bar Meta, and even then, Meta's like numbers weren't terrible, absolutely smashing all of
It
their
was a double
revenue
beat for
numbers.
most, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Apple
crazy.
posted record earnings yesterday, despite everyone thinking Apple is, you know, done. And they cited a lot of that being the latest model of the iPhone being the most popular of all time, which again falls back into consumer spending. But despite that, all of the other part of the story in all of these earnings was that, like, you know, capex is being increased a huge amount. They're spending way more and reinvesting in growth. So as a result of that, the market became a little bit more worried. We saw Meta's numbers moving up to like 150 billion in capex spend projected now, and you know, they dumped off of it. And I think like this is where things, when the numbers are going up in this environment, everything feels like the train is leaving the station and you start to see people FOMOing in. The moment we have a pullback, it's quite dramatic. Volatility is crazy right now. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, if we see crude continue to move up, I mean, everything's rallying and crude is over 110 bucks. This, it doesn't make any sense. These increased energy costs, they'll compound worries, they'll elevate rates, right? That, you know, adds fuel to the fire, the cost of capital, et cetera, et cetera. The key question for us is like, does all this just go away with a resolution in Iran? And it's like, maybe, like, but on the other side, how much pain if crude hits 150? That is almost certainly a lot. So when we kind of bring this back to crypto, everything we know about crypto and appetite for risk is, it all depends on risk appetite and liquidity. So if rates remain elevated, geopolitical tensions kind of like continue and rise, it creates a lot of uncertainty. But when the Nasdaq, S&P hitting all-time highs continuously, it's there's this same kind of feeling in crypto of like no one wants to be getting left behind, and that's where I feel like when we zoom now into this chart, which
Yeah,
we were just looking. I mean, I was looking at like the low of April to the high of April. It's like a 21% gain. It's a phenomenal month.
sure. Yeah, compared to the ones before,
Oof,
especially, right?
yeah,
No, I fully agree. And I think now, I was really wondering that that monthly candle on S&P was so embarrassing. Or well, we are so embarrassing compared to that. And I think
yeah,
today crypto is trying to make up a little bit for that. I will say though, I think personally, and I know you agree from our previous stream, we are really coming into that danger territory here with like so much resistance
mhm,
above our heads. And then also on the time side of things, I think usually we have like this certain durations that these pumps, little pumps of the lows take, and I think we're coming towards the end of it. Will we make new lows? I don't know, but I do think we're gonna do a good amount of sideways, also considering the fact that we are moving into the summer.
yes.
Yeah, it's I think we have some more pain to go, whether that pain is called chop or it's called downside. I think this is really, really the kind of the area where you need to be very, very careful. That's my read.
This block feels critical. We were talking before the stream, right? This is kind of like our fourth attempt now to to break through, really, and hold
Mm.
out. Um, what in your mind, Dan, if like I know that both of us probably have more of a bearish skew in the medium term.
Mm-hmm.
In the immediate term, what do you think from a how high can this rally go perspective? Like, do you do you think that, we can push above the November low? Do you think we get even close to challenging something as crazy as like the yearly open? Or do you think this is like a pretty swift kind of sweep of the November lows and then we're back down for either into the godforsaken range that we have been in,
The
or
eternal
what's your
range.
view?
Let me see. My computer is very slow for some reason, but we're gonna try to make it work. No,
It's all
I
that
personally,
green.
yeah, it's all the green. It's confused. It hasn't seen this for a while. No, I think to me it really depends on like the reactions that we do at certain levels. You guys can see that I marked out that gray zone, which is something that we touched on a lot in the stream with Chase. I think, if we have another rejection here, like imagine this daily candle ends up being pushed down, then I think like that was kind of it. So that's like the
Hmm.
first area of reaction. Then I think the second one is these November lows, obviously. So that comes in around 80.6, also confluent with the top of this channel. I'm not a channel person, but Fallis starts putting it on his charts, and you cannot deny how much it has worked both in this little consolidation and then in this one as well.
Yeah.
I think the story gets fairly different if we are able to reclaim the November lows with conviction. Because as you can see, we also have that daily EMA here in pink, which is the 200s. And I would say that I think by the time that price would potentially reclaim this, that one has come down there as well. So in that sense, we would have like a double confluence around the November lows. And if we can do like a really like confident reclaim of that, to me, that
What's
would
a
be
what's a
like,
confident reclaim for you, Dan? Like how do you want this to hold and play out in the best case scenario from a bullish perspective?
I think it would be like a strong close above the level, which in this case would then mean like a daily or, maybe even like a 2 or 3 day above it, and then kind of like a very shallow pullback into it, or maybe even not even really touching it, and then going from there. Like that's to
Mhm.
me what that would look like. But it's obviously really hard to say, right? Because some people would also have said that this here on the 12th of January was also like a strong close, but then we kind of like made our way back down from there.
Yeah.
I think we do have to keep in mind that if we zoom out, it still looks like a bear market. Equities, even though they are performing, I think a lot of people that are very smart agree that, things do feel like a little off in a way.
Yeah.
Just everything that we just discussed in regards to the macro, there's definitely stuff that's not lining up. Like it's not like it's everything in life is flowing kind of bull markets, where things are
Yeah.
just the world is just doing great. That's
It
not how
doesn't
it
feel like
feels.
fertile conditions basically to do this.
Yeah,
And and I think to your
exactly.
point as well, we talked near the beginning of February about what this might look like, right? All the way through into March. And one of the things, I mean, in several episodes, I know you've talked a lot about this. We talked about this on the episode with Chase. Well, we really called out, hey, look, this isn't probably going to be down only or just sideways only. There are going to be these moments where we have some interesting price action, but it's probably going to be a slow grind to really make some work on reclaiming like, levels close to
Mm,
above the yearly open or anything like that.
yeah, absolutely. And I think in this type of conditions, you have to take it step by step. And I know that sounds very boring, right? Because it's way much more fun to hear someone say, like, reclaim this and we're going to new all-time highs, like, but obviously we just have to be realistic. And like I said, I think we're closer to the top of this pump than we are to the bottom of it. So
Hmm.
therefore, I think like caution is definitely advised. And I would even say that into this area is not a bad area to look for short opportunities if the situation presents itself. But obviously, there's a lot that comes with it now, with the war and just all the macro stuff. But I think, for instance, this what we saw in gray here, with this little, yeah, you see these candles being pushed down.
Mm.
That is something that on the lower time frame would have been like a really beautiful thing to short. And I know quite some people did that as well, because that's the zone we marked out with Chase earlier. And I think like those type of price action, if we get that somewhere higher up, where it's like we get like this really clear rejection, price is trying to make new highs but is unable to, I think that's what you want to see. I'm trying to zoom in, but I'm not sure what's going on with my
Your,
laptop right now.
your laptop can't believe it. Can't
Yeah.
believe what it's seeing.
Exactly. No, but I think that's something that I'll be watching. I do have a small long open from 76. I said
Mm.
already to you before the stream, not the best entry, not the worst. But
Yeah.
unless we start, rejecting here in gray, I will try to sell that in the low 80s and not take too much risk with that, because I think the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, um, as you kind of said, we're more likely to be near the top of the highs than we are to be at the kind of like bottom of the lows right now. Um, and we are going to come up against a decent amount of resistance ahead. So, yeah, I think like we mentioned as well, that we had some like entry points that we were talking in and around that kind of like April lows level anyway, so not a bad place to be. But what about this chart? Less
Oh,
less
no, this is
interesting.
funny. This one is working perfectly.
Oh
Maybe because
yeah.
it doesn't have a green candle. Maybe that's why.
Well,
Oh
yeah,
man.
let's
Oh
talk about
man.
ETH.
Let's talk
Eh,
about ETH. Yeah, because I think with ETH will actually be like probably the better one to short if that's your thing, because as you can see, it really hasn't done any of the strength stuff that BTC has done. Because maybe we can try the low BTC here, see if that works better. Because with BTC, yes, we can see. Oh, I feel so much better now that I can scroll. With
Mhm.
BTC, we can see that we did like a kind of like a market structure is attempting things. We're holding
Yeah,
EMAs, we're like breaking above. That is a very, very different picture from this situation where it's like immediately
very
ended up
weak.
as a deviation. Yeah, there's not even an attempt to flip it. It was just kind of like this was already an SFP on the daily, and then from there on we just pushed down.
And there's been
I
some
think,
real bad news within the ETH ecosystem that I think is,
oh yeah,
pushing
bad
a lot of this. We had
for
the
sure.
Kelp DAO exploit and all of their restaking. A huge amount of their restaking ETH tokens were exploited, right? I think it was somewhere in the region of like 50,000 ETH worth. So it's a
Mm,
huge amount. And there's been this cascading effect. We're going to talk about Aave in a sec, so we don't need to jump onto that, but like huge cascading impact onto Aave, where we had a load of the lending markets hitting 100% utilization, which for those of you that don't know means, if you're lending assets in that pool, you cannot remove them. So it's been not great from a narrative perspective. And
mm,
yeah, you just look here, it's just like clear structural weakness while
yeah,
BTC is rallying. Not a good
absolutely.
sign for
And
ETH.
no, and the weird thing is that like altcoins haven't even performed that bad.
No.
There's definitely some alts that have performed pretty well the past week. There were for sure some outperformers. There were things that structurally moved pretty clean. So that's why what makes it even more interesting, right? Because usually ETH is kind of like a very good indicator of whether that's happening or not. And
Mm,
this time we saw that happening. I mean, listen, we're talking very small scale pumps, and mind you, like we're in a bear market and altcoins look horrendous.
yeah.
But I will say, like, comparatively, I thought that was very interesting. And with ETH, yeah, like you said, I think there's just too much structural risk right now. And it's clearly visible on the charts. I really don't see why anyone would prefer this above BTC right now or prefer it above maybe some of those alts that do look nice because yeah, we can't even make our way above the 1 day 100, which is something that BTC is very actively trying to do right now with the daily candle that still has to close today.
Yeah, and we were talking yesterday, Dan, a little bit about the um the narrative side of this, like stepping one foot back from the charts. When you look at ETH, I think ETH has always been kind of like the beta play to BTC, but it's had its own narrative. I think this like idea as well that ETH rallying often marks the beginning of an altcoin rally, which of course everyone loves. But then also, ETH has really had a lot of institutional infrastructure investment. It's kind of became the leader across all tokenized assets. Um, Solana has really been just in this like awkward middle ground of nothingness where ETH always still had some of this like allure, but I think ever since 1010, BTC has clearly been in the walls of crypto, the flight to safety, as it always will. But I think we've
Absolutely.
just seen that so much more acutely. So when you're looking at like what is the BTC beta play, no one wants to touch alts. Where's
Mm-mm.
the strength? And I think that's where we've only really seen very focused, like sectoral pumps, like Zcash and others, and then maybe hype as well as being like, okay, maybe there's more upside to something like hype.
Yeah.
What's the case? Like, how do you talk to your friends and say why ETH is a good long term buy right now? I just
I
I can't.
No, I mean, at least not here, right? I think
No.
eventually, maybe, and I actually have put a video up on this a few weeks ago on the bottoming scenario potentially on ETH. But I think here, because we can clearly see also on BTC, right, we have like this drives down and then these ranges that eventually break down again. So
Yeah.
logically, we want to be like bullish at the lows, even though, as you can see here, that doesn't even work out sometimes.
Yeah.
And we want to be bearish at the highs. Like that is how range trading usually works. We should never assume a breakout until it happens, which here we
Mhm.
can clearly see why that's such a good idea to think like that. And I think for ETH, at these prices, to me, there's no compelling argument. If there's a very big discount in the future, that might change. But I totally agree with you. Like for now, here, at least there's like nothing for me to, yeah. My mom always said, like, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. So I
Yeah,
think
that
that's the
chart's probably
vibe.
getting a whole lot of that right now.
Yeah, silence, silence.
For
No,
sure.
whereas like something like Hype, which we also traded, both the
Yeah.
bottom to the top and then the short scenario as well, last stream, I think. I will
Hmm.
delete this. This was for my FIB video that's coming out next week. But yeah, I think like if you look at something like Hype, there's just so much more structure.
Beautiful, really, isn't it,
You
to
know,
trade?
yeah, for sure. It really is beautiful to trade. And I think, yeah, for ETH, there was always just, I don't want to say it was a safe haven, but I think it felt, besides BTC, like just a very logical choice. And just the question is like whether into this next upcoming cycle, that thought process is going to remain the same, considering the fact there's so much more structural risk and there's so much more choice. And then also we have the whole DAT thing, which we did
Hmm.
a stream about once as well. Long story, but doesn't make it more appealing to me at least.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have single owner of 4.5% of the supply. That doesn't get me feeling good, to be
Oh my
completely
God.
honest.
No.
So I think there's a lot of headwinds. What do you think about this chart from an entry point perspective? I know that we're talking now about like some BTC strength. There's been a very strong, nice looking like uptrend. Is this beginning to look like a potentially good entry point? Are we pausing here? Like what's your view on hype?
I'm not loving how this kind of, it was a logical point to sell off on, which we also marked out as a TP and then as a short, but I think like it's not really, yeah, this is technically it is like a higher high versus this, but
Yeah.
it's not really like convincing to me. I think from here, I don't really see anything concrete as where we are now. It would have to be much lower down, back into that previous all-time high. But what I don't love is that we already have retested that.
Yeah.
If you look on the 4 hour, you can also see that it's been pretty choppy. It's not a very clear trend. So on hype, I think, yeah, look, if you zoom in like this or zoom out like this, I don't know. I think charts need more time in general. That would really be my read for things like BTC and ETH as well. Whether we are going to bottom, to the side or lower down and then to the side, I think like eventually that has to happen. But I do think that charts like Hype might front run the bottom on other assets, because it is moving a bit by itself, right? Like a lot of
Hmm.
things were also going down and this was going up. But if we would have to mark out a level, then it would be here. Maybe this little block to just make like a
Just like a
higher
slightly
low
higher
there.
low. Yeah.
Yeah. So then this would be, like your new market structure forming there.
Yeah, this one feels like kind of like a putting in quite a tight stop, especially considering we've already kind of like tapped that previous all-time high level, just to get that entry point nice. But yeah, I mean, this exact trade really has printed quite nicely across hype, and I think to your point, it's held quite a nice market structure through since really the start of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been. I know a lot of people have had some success trading hype.
Yeah, this would also line up with the FIB. Sorry, I know there's like a double FIB going on here, but from this to here, I
Yeah.
think that will be beautiful as well. But like I said, altcoin trading and betting on it big and having like crazy targets is not something for these conditions. That's also why I
Yep.
thought this was such a good TP here, right? And I saw a lot of people talk about like the 50s and the new all-time highs, and it's like, sure, like hype is the strongest, and I think eventually we will reach that on hype, but conditions, in my opinion, are not for making bets like that. I know I've repeated that like 1,000 times now, the past few months, but yeah, to me
Yeah.
that's still very true.
Yeah, I've definitely found it very hard to have the conviction to hold on a little longer for some of these, just because we have just seen such reversals in how crazy like a lot of the geopolitics and some of this stuff played out. But yeah, I think that what's been quite nice to see on this one is like the entry points have held out quite nicely as we've marked them out a lot of the different sessions we've went through.
Definitely. Yeah, and
You
there's always outliers to find, right? Because also here,
yes,
this one I thought was really interesting this week on
yeah,
Pengu. Although I will say, we're, a little bit at resistance now, but this is like your classical gap fill kind of trade, which
yes,
usually is
nice.
something, yeah, it's something that we do in bull markets, right? The gap fill trade. Even though potentially on BTC, we have the same thing happening now if we can reclaim this gray zone, because this is like the gap between the 1 day 100 and the 1 day 200, obviously. But with Penguin, we can see that it filled that pretty cleanly and nicely without much drawdown,
Yeah.
and with the confluence of some supports here also. So yeah.
And we were talking yesterday, and we were seeing similar type stuff on Doge as well. So like seeing just like memes have a bit of a move, especially when yeah, I mean it's
Just
not
scrolling
badly.
back, remember this?
Yeah,
Remember this?
never.
Yeah, I
Oh my
remember.
God,
Oh my God.
don't look at
But
it.
look
Don't
how
look at it.
but look how crazy it is, like the
Yeah.
price action that we were talking about like last summer. Look
Yes.
how big of a range, like percentage
Oh my
wise, that is
goodness.
versus like the price action that we're talking about now.
Zoom in. This is what we call exciting now.
I'm so curious if there's like a crypto class of 2026. You know what I mean?
Oh gosh, I
I
hope
mean, there
I
must be
pray for
some
them.
new people, even though it's probably only like 100 of them, but still, it's like, guys, if you're listening, it does get better. Like
Yeah, they're
eventually,
just absolute snipers when it comes to trading chop. That's because that's all they've ever seen. Uh,
yeah, well, that's how I was raised. I was raised
yeah,
in 2018, so same. A
that
little bit
was
different, but
extreme chop with very little hope. Yeah,
yeah, but I think like these charts are super interesting, right? With Doge as well, attempting that gap fill, and like we said, while ETH is really, really rejecting from important levels. So it's kind of the same as the macro situation where it's like different things are happening, but they're kind of like not adding up with each other, you know?
yeah.
It's
It is
confusing
rare.
markets in that sense, for sure.
Definitely. I mean, it is very rare for us to see Pengu, Doge. I don't know if maybe a few other memes had a run like Pepe or others. I haven't looked, but like it's rare for us to see that happen while ETH hasn't had like a first move. And in fact, it's had the opposite while these things have kind of been the first movers on some of this. So yeah, why don't we look at Aave as well? Because I know that was like one of the big
Oh,
catalysts. That is,
yeah.
if you're an Aave holder, it's been a bit of a white knuckle ride. I know it doesn't
Didn't
look
even
like
do
it.
that bad, honestly, because the whole situation didn't even result in new lows, which I think
Yeah,
is,
it's like a lot of strength when you really think about the severity of what has happened.
yeah.
For it not to crash through that level that you've just marked at and just puke completely is pretty
I
good.
think like in a sense that also kind of like shows how people are so mentally checked out.
Yes.
I've also seen like the amount of people that's tweeting regularly has decreased so much. Like CT feels pretty dead, and I assume it will continue to be even more dead throughout the summer where people like really leave their screens. But I think all of that is a part of it, and all of that adds to the scenario where eventually, we're gonna do the boring part. Like this wasn't boring enough, but we're gonna
Yeah.
do like the bigger, more sideways part where if we really zoom out, we will have, yeah, more of this. Doesn't have to be that long as we did here, but I think eventually,
I
that will
agree.
be like happening, whether it's from higher up or from lower down. And I think that will eventually for us be like the stepping stone towards a new bull market.
Yeah, and I
Eventually.
think well, you mentioned like CT feeling dead. I was for a completely different reason earlier today. I was looking at just general search demand trends, how much people are searching for terms in Google, Gemini, and others around like crypto trading, be like pricing of assets, stuff like that. Despite everything that we said, April was the lowest interest has been since July 2025. When you look at just
Really?
general search interest, so that's a always a good measure for me of like new demand and people that
Yeah.
are interested in coming in to purchase either crypto for the first time or they've been out and they're coming back in to try again. There has not been a lot of new inflows here at all.
Mm.
And as we know with BTC, the right now the biggest flows are institutional flows. We've also had a fair bit of buying from our friend Michael Saylor
Oh
as well,
God.
which I know Chase
Yeah.
talks about a lot.
Yeah.
But
So funny to
it's
me. I also
yeah,
thought think it was very clear. I think he stopped buying like either here or here. When it
yeah,
was like a push up and then when he stopped, it was immediately a push down.
yeah.
Yeah, it really
It's
shows
always
us.
hard to separate them, right? But like it is a factor. It's a factor that plays a big role in this.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's just not really a good sign, that whenever he quits, things stop going up.
I yeah, that's it doesn't fill you with confidence.
No, and
Well,
I will say also when we look at this on the weekly time frame, right? We just have to keep ourselves in check with being like too excited about things.
definitely.
We're coming into this weekly trend. Also, I think the 3 day has some really interesting emails as well, where we can see like so cleanly how bull markets hold it, and you know we lost
Well,
it, and now we're coming into it again.
if
If we
recent
are,
weeks are anything to go by, weekends have not necessarily been full of good news when it comes to the Iran conflict. So that is also something like I think I saw some analysis around like when Trump tends to share good news, and it's nearly
yep.
always Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And like it's
Mm.
the weekends are usually reserved for the bad news. Coincidentally, when the market's closed, it's quite the coincidence though. But I think that's another thing to think about. We are coming close to time. Before we end, I don't want to end our tradition of finding a dino coin that's
Oh,
been
I
making a
know
move.
what you're gonna
Well, I
say.
couldn't find a dino coin this time, so I thought I'd switch to a trauma coin, and we will bring up
Yes,
Luna Classic. Look at
I love this
this.
new editorial of the trauma coin. This is crazy though, of all the things.
I
And
know.
then and then
Look
look.
at this. There's the trauma, right? That you
Oh my
can't even
God.
you can't even get the candle. Oh my God, I shouldn't
Oh my
laugh.
God.
This was an awful day.
No, RIP
But
to all the fallen soldiers.
oh
We
my
always think
gosh.
of you guys and your sacrifice. No, this is
But
wow,
what a
of all
time to be
things
alive if
pumping.
you're in the class of 2026 for some reason buying Luna Classic and it's up like pretty significant amount. I mean, you're up
Yeah,
about what's that?
wild.
100,
Absolutely.
200% in the past like week or so, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty big move.
Crazy. Well,
Ah,
that's a funny note to end on for sure. Trauma coin, new editorial has been approved. Let's see what we can bring next time. I have a few ideas for sure.
yeah, well, I think we got a lot to watch over the rest of today in particular. I think it's really important for
Oh
BTC to
yeah,
kind of hold
so
this
important.
strength.
Let's really quick recap here for BTC. This is already, I'm not loving this.
Mhm.
Hoping it doesn't close like that because I think this is a risky situation. That this is kind of like, can I invert it here? Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
If you invert it here, to me, like anywhere where this starts to bounce from, so AKA dump from, because we just inverted it, looks like a good bottom, but that could also be here, right?
Yeah.
That's just how these charts work. But if we start like rejecting very sharply from here, from this like 17th of April high, would not be good.
No.
I think we have a 4-hour close in an hour and 15 minutes. That
Got
one will
some work to
be,
do.
yeah, there's definitely some work to do. Can we manage over the weekends? I think the 80s are in play. If we cannot, then gray was indeed the zone that we have marked out for weeks as our biggest hurdle. And yeah, that was clearly a good zone because so far not been able to. But let's see. Like I said, very conflicting things on our charts, right? Bullish trends, bullish one-day EMA flip so far. Yeah, but then structurally it looks not super good unless we reclaim. So that will be my final note.
Big weekend ahead, big day ahead. Hopefully,
Yes.
we see a little bit of strength here. But we'll call it for today. Thanks everyone for joining us live, tuning in. We'll of course have the replay coming out very soon. We'll chop up some of the best bits and get a post out on the Kraken blog as well with a summary. Of course, make sure that you follow Kraken Pro, Kraken FX, myself, Dentoshi on X. We'll share out a bunch more related to what we've been discussing and keep everyone up to date on all the price action. And of course, we'll be back soon with the next episode of Trading Spaces. Thanks so much, Den. I hope you have a great weekend.
Yes, you too. Bye, guys.